redoing some old videos and decided to redo this cylinder leak test video. Doing a cylinder leak test is actually, it's a little complicated. Get everything set up the way it's supposed to be. What a cylinder leak test does is we inject a metered amount of air into a cylinder, and then we see what percentage of air escapes. Now, there's always going to be some percentage that escapes. We can't completely seal a cylinder. So a normal escape amount might be like 15 or 20%, and anything above that might be suspicious. Now, we're looking for where the air is going if it is escaping. And there's really 4 places it can go. It can go past pistons and rings and cylinder wall and pressurized crankcase, which would indicate that I've got worn components there. It can go into the cooling system and through cracks or blown gaskets and things like that. It can go out the intake, so air escaping out the intake, which would happen if I had like valves, intake valves that were to open when they shouldn't be. And same thing for the exhaust. Air out the exhaust manifold if I have exhaust valves that are open when they shouldn't be. So to do this test, I need to have the cylinder that I'm testing in a very specific position, and that is top dead center compression stroke. What that means is that the intake valves are closed, the exhaust valves are closed, the piston is all the way up at the top of its bore. All right. Now, I've already set this engine up so that it's at number 1 cylinder compression top dead center. And the reason I did that was to confirm that the cam timing had not jumped, that the cams were still in the same relative position that they need to be when I compare that to the crank position. And this thing looks great. It really does. The other thing is you can see that the valve cover is off. And the reason for that is that I wanted to take a look at all of my followers and all of my cam lobes. Okay. And the reason I wanted to do that was because typically if I've got bent valves, I'm going to see followers that are sitting low. They're not necessarily sitting against the lobes, but I don't see that here, which means if I do have bent valves, they're very, very slightly bent. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the plug out of number 1 cylinder and thread in the adapter for the cylinder leak tester. And I'm going to pause while I do that. All right, so I ran into a problem. I pulled the spark plug out of there, and it's really hard to see, but the threads on the cylinder head are damaged. So at some point in time, somebody cross-threaded that spark plug in, or maybe it blew out of the cylinder head and beat it up. But the threads are too deep for my adapter to thread into. So what that means is I'm going to have to find another cylinder to do my cylinder leak test on. Number 1's not going to work. So since I suspect all of the cylinders have bent valves, I'm going to take a look at this and determine which cylinder is going to be the one that's most likely to be the next one going to top dead center compression. So I look at my intake valves here, and I see that my lobes are pointing away from the center of the engine. My exhaust valves, the lobes are pointing away from the center of the engine. And it's very hard to see, but if you can see down in there, you can sort of see. Well, not really. Yeah, it's hard to see. I really have a hard time getting that. The piston is up at the top. I can see it without the light, but the camera's not picking it up. So I can use something like a pencil, set it down in there, and we can see the pencil is actually sitting up pretty high, okay? So the piston's right at the top. So I need to look for my next cylinder that's going to go to that orientation. So I look at this one, and it looks to me like number 2 cylinder is not going to go there because my intake valves are going to be coming open. So the intake lobes are going to be pointing towards the center, not away from the center. Come to number 3, intake valves are open. That's a good sign. So that means when it rotates, the intake valves are going to start, lobes are going to start going away from the center. So let's look at the exhaust valves. The exhaust lobes are pointing up, which means they're going to rotate this way. So number 3 cylinder is the next one that's going to go to top dead center compression stroke. So I hope you kind of understand the logic behind what I was just doing. Let me get that plug out of there. Okay. What I'm looking for, again, is that position where the engine will be rotated to where that cylinder is at top dead center of the compression stroke. To be at top dead center of a compression stroke, intake and exhaust valves must be closed and the piston must be at the top of its bore. I'm going to put this pencil in there, and I'm using a pencil because it's soft. Actually, I'm not going to put that pencil in there yet because that piston is all the way down in the bore, which means that I put that pencil in that deep and it still hadn't touched the piston. I don't want that. So I'm going to rotate this engine a little bit, then I'm going to put the pencil in there. Okay, so let's start rotating. See if I'm right. Okay, here we go. Okay, and see the exhaust valves, intake, exhaust is definitely, okay. Intake, definitely, yep, everything's moving the direction I want. My exhaust valve's this way, my intake that way. Now I'm gonna put the piston, or the pencil in there, and now I see it sitting on top of the piston. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slowly rotate this engine, watching the pencil till I see the pencil stop moving. And up, the pencil just started moving down. So that means that I'm going to back up slightly. That looks pretty top dead center. Number 3, according to the pencil, I think it'll come up just slightly. And I think we're there. All right, so my cam lobes appear to be oriented properly. I can actually see the top of the piston, which I'm not even going to try to show you. Now I can thread this in. Maybe. There we go. Okay, I'm going to pause right there for a minute. All right, there's the cylinder leak tester. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug air in on this side, and I'm going to put this side on my adapter. All right, and I'm going to look and see on this gauge what my percent leak is. And you can see down there on the red side, 100% leak would tell me that I have every bit of air going in, escaping out. Okay, and you'll also notice that this range here, 20 to 40%, is kind of considered normal. And it is. In other words, you're going to have leakage. That's unavoidable. All right, the closer to that 20% number you are, the better off you are. But you're going to have leakage. All right, moderate, I don't really believe in moderate. Okay, I think if you've got more than 40, 50% leak, there's a problem and you need to figure out where it's at. But maybe at 60%, you've got an engine that still runs. Okay. All right, 80%, no, definitely a problem. I have to plug the air into this, and then I want to set it and calibrate it. Okay, so right now I should have no leakage at all. Okay, and so my needle should be at 0. And it sounds like my compressor's running, so the needle's a little low right now. So I'm going to wait a minute and we're going to try that again. All right, so there's a lot of variables to this. Like I said, my compressor's running, so that can change my setting. What I really want to do is I want to set this gauge using the pressure regulator so that I've got this needle right there at that 0. And what that tells me is that if I have any leakage, it's going to be some percentage from 0 to 100. Okay, so it looks to me like right now I need to change that a little bit. That's a little too much. Let's go ahead and get it set right at 0. I think that's pretty much 0. So now I'm going to lock my regulator in, and I'm going to plug it in here. And I think, okay, it's showing me immediately 100% leakage. Okay, and I hear it, but I'm not sure where it's going. Okay, yeah, that's oddly enough doesn't seem to be going past the intake. So I'm going to go check the exhaust. Hang on. All right, so I open the intake valve, throttle valve here. I don't really hear a change. So that tells me it's not coming out the intake. But when I go to the exhaust and stick my finger or my hand or my nose or anything right there by the exhaust pipe at the rear, by the muffler, I can very faintly hear it. The more than anything, I can smell it. So it's definitely pushing out the exhaust valves for some reason. And again, I'm not sure why, because the cam timing looks really good, but this thing definitely looks like it's got at least 2 bent exhaust valves. And since the compression on every cylinder was low, I got to believe it's all of the exhaust valves. So that's how you do a cylinder leak test. And I know this is a long video, but we ran into a couple of problems here. And actually, I think there's a lot to learn from everything that I covered. So if you're doing a cylinder leak test, good luck. There's your procedure.